Really, really interesting article that I'm going to link in the description here. Everything that's talked about in this video will be linked in the description. In the 90s, there was an official scorekeeper working for the Vancouver Grizzlies. At the time, he was feeling remarkably discouraged about the way that stats were being recorded and the way that they were trending. Namely, his issue was with assists. Now, to his credit, I actually kind of agree with him. Even still to this day, I think it's kind of a gray area because the textbook definition of it is what? A pass that directly leads to a basket. But here's the thing is, and these were his words, it's such an inherently subjective thing to have to track. Like, what exactly constitutes an assist isn't really defined by the definition itself. You know what I mean? Like, if you ask 5 different people, you're probably going to get like 4 or 5 different answers. For example, we could list 100 different ones, but if you execute a dribble handoff and then the guy dribbles around for 3 seconds, sizes somebody up and then spots up and knock down the shot, like, technically that's not an assist because the guy messed around for a second. But like, we're all not idiots, and that guy's going to get an assist. So one night, in an effort to, spite the man that makes up the NBA, kind of a childish act, in his words, but he saw that the Lakers were coming into town, and he knew we're about to get the brakes beaten off of us. I'm going to give Nick Van Exel as many assists as humanly possible. If there is an opportunity where I can say technically that was probably an assist for Nick Van Exel, I'm going to be super generous, and I'm going to give it to him. The result of this was Nick Van Exel recording 23 assists, okay? This is like Scott Skiles level facilitating, and I love Nick Van Exel. Those of you who are around to watch him or have even retroactively gone back and watched his highlights, like, we love Nick Van Exel. He's always been great, but he was never putting up 23 assists a game, so it's just kind of one of those nights that turns out to be an anomaly, and there's kind of a reason why it was, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. The interesting thing about this is technically Nick Van Exel didn't even need the help because the disparity in assists that were recorded on the road versus at home, he saw a 24% increase in games that were recorded in Los Angeles, in his home arena. This happened frequently in the 90s. It happened with Mark Price, even going into the 2000s. It happened with Steve Nash. We've covered Nick Van Exel. But the biggest one, and this has been talked about for damn near 30 years at this point, is the whole John Stockton thing and how many of his assists were actually assists, and is his record actually valid? Now, if you ask any Salt Lake publication, they're going to do their due diligence and tell you that no, like, sometimes maybe we were being a little bit generous, but for the most part we were unbiased, and like the disparity that existed versus home and away assists recorded, like, it's marginal enough that nothing really funny is going on. Now, as a quick aside, but still important to the story here, do you remember a couple years ago when a bunch of like 20-year-olds woke up on Reddit one day and were like, wouldn't it be really funny if we tanked the American economy for like 3 or 4 weeks? And then they proceeded to short a bunch of AMC and GameStop stock, and the people that we typically root for to lose a lot of money did in fact lose a lot of money. And even though it was kind of this weird problem that Reddit created, it was still really, really funny. Yeah, Reddit's at it again in what can only be described as the most unexpected and just bizarre bombshell to have drop at like 4 o'clock in the morning. The Memphis Grizzlies scorekeeper is posting fraudulent numbers. Now, this brave martyr, if that's how you want to look at him, this leader of the Rebel Alliance, did all his homework here. I can't show any of the clips that were provided in the comments, but again, everything that I talk about in this video, there will be a link in the description. The only reason I can't show clips is because YouTube's terms of service, sometimes you get I'm just not going to risk it. I'm not going to show any clips in here, but you can check the description for the Reddit post. So here's what happens. Over the summer, the Grizzlies announced Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to miss like 4 to 6 months getting surgeries at an injury. He's going to be missing some extended time. At the time, he's plus 10,000 odds for Defensive Player of the Year. Fast forward to today, and he's minus 200. We're talking about a guy who's like the leader in the clubhouse. And, before the season, I mean, even if he wasn't hurt, to be fair, and to Jaren Jackson Jr.'s credit, we would probably be touting him as a DPOY candidate regardless, because this isn't new. Like, go back to his days at Michigan State. Like, he's been a shot blocker this whole time. Catch him in the drop coverage on a pick and roll. Like, that's his bread and butter. This is just what he does. However, if there has ever been a game that you have watched, or maybe box score watched, and you saw that Jaren Jackson was putting up some absolutely filthy numbers and had like 100 stocks per game, yeah, there may be a reason for that. Because, as it turns out, a lot of these stats that are being credited to Jaren are, like, not real, and some of them are marginal enough where it's like, I don't know, did he graze the ball? Like, does that technically count as a... But some of them are just, like, blatantly like, dude, he did not get this steal. This was just, like, a missed shot. That's, like, not a block at all. What's going on here? Now, the reason that I felt it was important to include the context at the beginning was really just to set a precedent that, like, I know this feels super bizarre, but it's actually not unheard of that there are these like scorekeeper biases. Like it's just going to happen. A lot of these guys have been with the team for a really long time. Some of them have been fans for a really, really long time. Like at the end of the day, the dudes who are these statisticians, these scorekeepers, like they love the game. That's why they're doing what they do. And a lot of the time, they're probably really going to love the players on their team. So yeah, if you juice the stats a little bit, like it's going to reflect kind of nice. This, however, is not. That doesn't mean it's okay. That doesn't mean it's like good. Like, can I understand it? Can I see the perspective? Like, if I was a scorekeeper for the Pistons, like, would I give Cade an extra steal or assist or a rebound every now and then? Like, yeah, I probably would. And you would probably do the same for your favorite player. But to do it on a level that another Redditor, because that's the collective teamwork going on over on Reddit over this thing is absolutely bananas. And I also want to say for posterity, it seems like every time I sit down to think like, okay, it's time to record this video, a new piece of information comes out, right? So we have just barely begun to kind of peel back all the layers on what might be going on here. But what's interesting is another lovely Redditor decided to, I don't really understand how he did it. Again, post will be linked below. You can check it out yourself and you can peer review it. But essentially, the disparity is so large that he said that there is a 1 in 3 million chance that this is coincidence. That the likelihood that this is just like a, oops, Jaren Jackson just happens to be really, really good at home and like just fine on the road. 1 in 3. You have a higher percentage chance of getting struck by lightning than Jaren Jackson has at being this fucking good at home. It's so bizarre that Sam Quinn went on Twitter and correctly pointed out that on Caesars, you can't even bet Jaren Jackson for depoy right now. He was up to minus 200, and the league was like, well, not even the league, but bookies were like, we got to stop taking action on this. Something funny's going on. Until the league looks into what's going on, we aren't taking any more money. Do you know how crazy something could potentially be if Las Vegas says, we don't want your money, we're good for right now? This is something I'm reading in real time. I think somebody got to Fred Katz. I don't know if he got shook. So he was talking about this post is making its way around the league right now, not just the internet. For what it's worth, I checked in, and the Grizzlies used the same official scorer this season as they used last season. That's maybe interesting. And then he says, someone who knows the process just corrected me on this. Leaving up the above tweet so that people see the correction. Official scorers actually don't handle stats like this. They handle fouls. NBA reviews stats like blocks and steals in real time. So all I'm really getting out of this is that somebody got to Fred Katz. Somebody texted him and was like, hey, you're going to probably want to amend this, take this down, maybe put out some good PR for it. Look, I don't know. Maybe this ends up being a complete nothing burger. I have no idea. What I'm not excited for is for all the people to act like it's kind of like boxing. Whenever there's that huge fight that comes around, let's use Mayweather and McGregor as an example. All of a sudden, for the 3 months leading up to that fight, and especially the week or two leading up to the fight, suddenly everybody's an expert on boxing and everybody knows everything, especially when the fight is going on. Well, I had this on my scorecard. I actually think he won by 4 points. I think the judges had it wrong. It's like, dude, you just started watching boxing like 2 weeks ago. You actually don't know what you're talking about. It's kind of the same. I'm not looking forward, and this isn't, hey, I don't know either, but I'm not looking forward to all of the statistician Stevens in the comments and in the reply, everywhere, not even just on this video, but being like, well, actually, if you know about statisticians, no, I don't. None of us do. I don't know how these stats are being recorded. I just know that if there's a weird disparity like this, something's probably going on. And I just want to say, I actually don't think this is a reflection on Jaren, because I think it's really unfair to assume that he's like in on the take here. And it's not inconceivable to think that, and I'm not throwing accusations around, but it is not exactly unheard of that players or managers or coaches, that people within an organization will bet on games within their own team. Maybe they'll take a future on a depoy, right? If I know that I'm in control of the stats and I see a plus 10,000 future on a depoy, it's like, can I cash it? Like, I think that's a theory that's being thrown around. I just think that's a little bit too harsh. Before we know more about this, I don't really want to go down that road. However, it goes without saying, I mean, this is going to be, isn't it kind of bizarre that in a league that is having a year where, I mean, teams are scoring 150 points, right? Like we've talked about this in a few videos. There's a scoring bubble right now. Everybody who wants to score 30 can go get 30. Isn't it kind of bizarre that somebody was able to pinpoint like a defensive anomaly like this? Like somebody amidst all this scoring was like, wait, but this defense, these numbers are a little, who duped these stats? What's going on here? It's bizarre, and I can't wait. I think there's going to have to be a follow-up video to this when we maybe learn a little bit more information, because this is very new at the time of this recording. It's just such an interesting and unique thing. Like I said, this has happened before. We have had some weird occurrences like this before. So again, even though it's not unheard of, the ripple effect that this could cause and the investigation that I think the league is going to have to put into this, it's not unprecedented, but it's like such a unique drama for the NBA to have to manage in a time where, because when it happens 30 years ago, like, we are not all chronically online, right? Like, we're not just perpetually like, what's the latest and greatest news in the NBA? You got to read about it in like the paper. You got to wait till like Saturday when SportsCenter comes on, and that's when you get all your sports news. You know what I mean? But now it's like boom, 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 and you can have all these little independent Redditors doing their little independent research, and like, how much value is in that? You know, take that with a grain of salt. And I'm not saying these guys are wrong, because from my perspective in this moment, it's kind of like these dudes are doing the Lord's work on Reddit. Like, these dudes are doing something that, like, I don't know, like, what's going to happen. Also kind of sucks because I find it fun to root for the Grizzlies. And not that that's maybe the important takeaway here. Maybe what we should end on here is that this is not actually a reflection on the team itself, right? As it stands, it's not. It's just like a guy going rogue who just really wants to see his guy win Defensive Player of the Year. And at its core, well, that's a little relatable to me. Well, no, because that makes it sound like I'm on his side. How weird is this?